Chapter 1. You're just talking. But their nervous system is panicking. Here's what I think. Most people who deal with avoidance aren't saying anything wrong. They're saying normal, everyday stuff. Stuff that would feel fine, even loving to a secure person. But to an avoidant, that same sentence can land like a threat. And no, not because you're too much. Not because you're needy. Not because you said it badly. It's because avoidants don't hear words the way you do. They hear implications. They hear expectations. They hear future obligations forming in real time. And their nervous system goes, nope, abort, retreat. You won't believe this. But half the time they don't even know why they're uncomfortable. They just feel it in their chest. That tight, cornered feeling. So let's break it down, friend to friend. 5 things you say that feel normal to you, but feel threatening to an avoidant. Let's start with the first one. 1. I miss you. Sounds harmless, right? Sweet, human, vulnerable. You say it because you're connected, because they matter, because absence made you think of them. But here's what happens in an avoidant's head. I miss you. Avoidant brain. I am being emotionally referenced. And that's not poetry, that's pressure. Here's the thing people don't tell you. Avoidants don't process longing as closeness. They process it as responsibility. To them, I miss you quietly turns into, I should be here more. I'm not giving enough. Something is expected now. And the wild part? You didn't say any of that. But their nervous system fills in the blanks instantly. So instead of feeling wanted, they feel evaluated. Can you imagine that? Someone tells you they miss you and your body reacts like you're being graded. That's why some avoidants respond with, oh, a meme, or worse, silence. Not because they don't care, but because the statement pulls them toward emotional proximity, and proximity triggers their internal alarm. Here's what makes this worse. If you say, I miss you consistently, they don't hear affection. They hear a pattern forming. And patterns feel like traps to an avoidant. So if you've ever thought, why do they pull back when I show love? This is why. 2. Can we talk? Now this one is dangerous. To you, it means, let's clear something up. I want connection. I want to understand you. To an avoidant, you might as well say, you are about to be emotionally examined. Because can we talk? Doesn't land as neutral. It lands as pre-conflict. Their body reacts before their brain catches up. Heart rate up, chest tight, mind scanning for exits. They immediately assume one of 3 things. They've disappointed you. They're about to be asked for more. They're going to lose autonomy. And here's the messed up part. Even if the conversation is positive, their nervous system doesn't trust it. So instead of curiosity, they feel anticipation stress. That's why they delay. That's fine, but later. I'm busy right now. We can talk another time. But later isn't about timing. It's about avoidance. Because real talking means emotional exposure. And exposure feels unsafe to them. Let me be blunt here. If someone consistently avoids conversations, it's not because they don't understand you. It's because understanding leads to expectations. And expectations threaten their sense of freedom. What do you think? Have you noticed how fast the energy changes when you say those 3 words? Why these feel threatening? Quick reality check. Let's pause for a second. This isn't about you being wrong. And it's not about avoidance being villains either. It's about 2 different emotional languages. You speak connection. They speak self-protection. You move toward closeness when you feel something. They move away when closeness increases. So when you say something normal, something emotionally honest, they don't hear love. They hear dependency forming, expectations rising, space shrinking, and their system reacts accordingly. Not consciously, automatically. That's why logic doesn't fix it. That's why reassurance doesn't land. That's why explaining yourself often makes it worse. Because you're talking to their mind. But the fear lives in their body. Chapter 2. You think you're being supportive. They feel cornered. So here's what I think. Most people mess things up with avoidance not when they're emotional, but when they're trying to be understanding. Yeah, the nicer you try to be, the more trapped the avoidant can feel. Sounds backward, I know, but stay with me. Let's talk about the next two things you say that feel completely normal to you and quietly terrifying to an avoidant. 3. I'm here for you. This one hurts to explain because on the surface, it's pure care. It's kindness. It's emotional availability. You say it because you want to be safe for them. You want them to lean on you. You want them to know they're not alone. But here's how it lands. I'm here for you. Avoidant brain. Oh, so now I'm expected to open up. And that's the problem. To an avoidant, support doesn't feel like relief. It feels like exposure. Because if you're here for them, that means they're supposed to need you. They're supposed to let you in. They're supposed to reciprocate emotionally. And they don't know how to do that without losing control. So instead of feeling comforted, they feel watched. Like there's now a spotlight on their inner world. You won't believe this, but many avoidants would rather struggle alone than risk being emotionally seen and misunderstood. Why? Because their nervous system learned early on that needing equals disappointment, depending equals danger, vulnerability equals loss of autonomy. So when you offer presence, they don't think, wow, I'm safe. They think, what if I can't give back what this person is offering? And that thought creates pressure. Pressure leads to withdrawal. That's why you'll often see them respond with, I'm fine. It's nothing. I don't really want to talk about it. Not because they don't feel anything, but because letting you be there would mean crossing a line they're terrified of crossing. Can you imagine being offered help and feeling stressed instead of relieved? Yeah, that's their reality. 4. Why are you pulling away? Okay. This one feels reasonable, logical, even necessary. From your perspective, you're just naming a pattern. You feel distance. You feel a shift. So you ask about it. That's healthy communication, right? Well, not to an avoidant. To them, this sentence feels like exposure plus accusation rolled into one. Because the moment you say it, a few things happen instantly. First, their behavior is being noticed. Second, they're being asked to explain something they don't fully understand themselves. Third, there's an implied request for change. And avoidants hate being asked to explain internal states they don't have language for. You're asking why. They don't know why. They just know they feel uncomfortable. So instead of clarity, they feel shame. Shame sounds like, I'm doing something wrong. I'm failing at closeness. I'm about to be criticized. And once shame shows up, they shut down or get defensive. That's why you might hear, I'm not pulling away. You're overthinking. I just need space. But here's the brutal truth. When you point out an avoidance distancing while they're distancing, you amplify the very behavior you want to stop. Because now, the distance isn't just a feeling, it's a problem they're being confronted about. And confrontation feels unsafe. What do you think? Have you noticed how fast the conversation derails after this question? The core problem, let's be honest. Let's strip this down to the core. Avoidants don't fear connection. That's a myth. They fear being trapped in emotional obligation. Every sentence we've talked about so far shares one hidden theme. There is now an emotional expectation attached to you, and expectations feel like loss of freedom. So their system does what it's trained to do. It creates distance. Not because they want to hurt you, not because they're cold, but because closeness without control feels dangerous to them. Here's where people mess up. They think, if I just explain myself better, they'll understand. No, understanding doesn't fix nervous system fear. You're trying to solve an emotional reflex with logic. That's why reassurance often backfires. That's why emotional clarity doesn't land. That's why more communication sometimes creates more distance. Quick reality check, friend to friend. I'm going to be very direct here. If you constantly feel like you're walking on eggshells, you're afraid to express normal needs, you're editing your words to avoid triggering withdrawal. That's not a communication issue. That's a mismatch in attachment capacity. You're operating from a place of emotional openness. They're operating from emotional containment. Neither is evil. But pretending they work the same way will keep hurting you. And no, loving them harder won't fix this. That's a fantasy. Change only happens if they become aware of their patterns and actively work on regulating closeness instead of running from it. You cannot do that work for them. Let that sink in. Chapter 3. It sounded harmless. So why did they shut down? Here's what I think. The biggest mistake people make with avoidance isn't being emotional. It's assuming that tone matters more than meaning. You soften your voice. You joke a little. You keep it light. But avoidants don't react to tone first. They react to implication. Let's get into it. 5. We should do this more often. Now come on, this is normal, right? You had a good time. You felt connected. So you say it naturally. To you, it means, I enjoyed this. Let's not disappear again. This felt nice. To an avoidant, this sentence quietly screams. A pattern is forming, and patterns are terrifying to them. Because more often doesn't sound like fun. It sounds like routine, expectation, predictability turning into obligation. They don't hear enjoyment. They hear commitment creeping in through the back door. You won't believe this, but even if they also enjoyed the moment, their body doesn't relax. It tenses. Because now they're thinking, what if I can't maintain this? What if they expect consistency? What if I lose the option to pull back? And the second consistency enters the picture. Their nervous system starts planning an exit. That's why after great dates, deep talks, or intense bonding moments, avoidants often disappear. Not because the moment was bad, because it was too good. Can you imagine enjoying something so much that it scares you? Yeah, that's the paradox. 6. I feel really close to you. This one feels intimate, soft, almost romantic. You're sharing an internal experience, not asking for anything, not demanding anything, just stating a feeling. But to an avoidant, this sentence feels like emotional gravity, because closeness implies attachment, emotional entanglement, mutual dependency forming, and dependency is the red flag. Avoidants are hyper-aware of moments where emotional bonds deepen. Those moments signal loss of control to them. So when you say, I feel close to you, they instantly wonder, do they expect me to feel the same? What if I don't? What if I do? And then can't handle it? Either way, pressure shows up. That's why their response might be silence, a joke, changing the subject, or something vague like, yeah, we get along well. It's not that they don't feel anything. It's that acknowledging closeness makes it real, and real means risky. What do you think? Have you ever noticed how intimacy sometimes creates distance instead of bonding? 7. Are we okay? All right. This one hits deep. To you, this is reassurance seeking. A check-in, a way to stay connected. To an avoidant, this feels like you are responsible for regulating my emotional safety. And that's heavy. Because now, they're not just managing their own internal discomfort, they're being asked to manage yours too, even if that's not what you mean. Even if you say it gently. Their system hears, something is wrong. I need to fix this. I'm failing somehow. And here's the brutal part. Avoidants don't trust reassurance that they have to give on demand. Because reassurance creates a loop. You ask, gives, they reassure, gives you feel better, gives you ask again later. And to them, that feels like emotional labor with no clear endpoint. So instead of answering honestly, they may minimize, get annoyed, pull away further, not because the question was unfair, but because it places emotional responsibility on someone who already struggles with emotional regulation. Can you imagine being asked to calm someone else when you don't even feel calm yourself? Exactly. The pattern you're missing. Let's connect the dots. Every sentence in this part shares one thing. It makes the relationship more defined. Avoidants are okay in ambiguity. They feel safest when nothing is clearly labeled. Moments are fine. Feelings are fine, as long as they stay unspoken. Connection is fine, as long as it stays flexible. The second you, name it, acknowledge it, try to stabilize it. Their system reacts. because clarity feels like a door closing, and they survive by keeping doors open. Hard truth, no sugarcoating? I'm going to say something people hate hearing. If you constantly feel confused, anxious, or like you're chasing emotional clarity, you're probably more invested in security than they are, and that imbalance will hurt you. Avoidants often benefit from relationships where they receive connection without being asked to define it, without being asked to sustain it. That works for them, but it slowly drains the other person. So if you're reading this thinking, I recognize myself in all of this. Good. Awareness is power. But awareness without boundaries turns into self-betrayal. Let that land. Chapter 4. What actually works. And what you need to decide? Here's what I think. Most people don't get hurt by avoidance because they're evil or heartless. They get hurt because they overinterpret potential and under-acknowledge patterns. So let's talk about what really matters. What actually feels safe to an avoidant, no fantasy version. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Avoidance feels safest when they control closeness. They initiate contact. They decide the pace. They aren't asked to define or sustain the bond. Spontaneity feels safe. Predictability feels dangerous. Low emotional demand feels safe. Emotional reciprocity feels risky. And before you romanticize that, stop. Because this means the relationship often works best for them, not for you. Here's what does tend to land better with avoidance. Statements instead of questions. Observations without emotional weight. Space without punishment. Consistency without pressure. For example, instead of, "Are we okay?" give "say nothing and observe behavior." Instead of "I miss you," gives "live your life and see if they move closer." Instead of "Why are you pulling away?" gives "pull your focus back to yourself." Not because this magically fixes them, but because it removes the push-pull dynamic. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If they don't step forward when pressure is removed, they were never going to. What you need to is stop personalizing. This part matters. You need to stop assuming. Their withdrawal means you're unlovable. Their silence means you said something wrong. Their distance means you failed emotionally. Most of the time, it has nothing to do with you. It's about their tolerance for intimacy, their fear of emotional obligation, their unresolved attachment wounds. But, and listen carefully, understanding this does not mean tolerating behavior that hurts you. Empathy without boundaries is self-abandonment. Full stop. The question you actually need to ask yourself, everyone asks, how do I make an avoidant feel safe? Wrong question. The real question is, can I be emotionally healthy in a dynamic where my needs trigger someone else's fear? Because that's the reality. Your needs aren't excessive. They're just incompatible with someone who associates closeness with danger. So ask yourself honestly, can I express myself without shrinking? Can I tolerate inconsistency without anxiety? Can I stop hoping they'll change if I stay patient? If the answer is no, that's not failure. That's clarity. One last reality check, friend to friend. Avoidants don't change because someone loves them enough. They change when their patterns cost them something. They feel internal motivation to heal. They take responsibility for their nervous system. You cannot talk someone into emotional capacity. And waiting around, explaining yourself better, being softer, quieter, easier. That doesn't make you mature. It makes you slowly disappear. And that's not growth. So let's close this cleanly. You weren't wrong for speaking. You weren't wrong for feeling. You weren't wrong for wanting clarity, closeness, or consistency. But now you know something important. Some people experience love as safety. Others experience it as a threat. Your job isn't to prove your worth to someone who's afraid to receive it. Your job is to decide. Does this dynamic let me be fully myself, or am I constantly managing someone else's fear? Answer that honestly. Everything else becomes obvious after that.